so they know. Do you want to give him a couple of minutes? Yeah, give it 60 seconds and then I'll do it.
I'm very out of shot. You do. Do I look
You're the
smart?
gaffer. Yes, you do.
Yeah. Gorgeous as well. As long as you're not being taped. Darryl was telling
Thanks for the reminder.
Darryl was telling me about the taping. I know.
We'll try and avoid that this year.
I know. I'll shuffle them.
That'd have been alright.
Do we count them in?
No, it's fine. Okay, everybody, we're about to start.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming here to Place and Kirklees. It's the first time we've held our members' meeting here, so on behalf of myself and all of the board and the staff at SWYPFT, thank you very much indeed. There's a couple of housekeeping things I need to say first, and then we'll get on with it if that's okay. First of all, can you all hear me? Yeah? Is that okay? And is it okay on the mic? Yeah, we can all hear each other. That's great. A couple of housekeeping things first, if I may. There's no planned fire alarms, so if there is a fire, the fire alarm itself will sound, there's fire alarm instructions everywhere. In fact, I would just say follow the guy in the blue suit and we'll all go out to fire exits, if that's okay. Just to let you know, the meeting is being publicly streamed this afternoon, and as I say, because it is a meeting in public, you know, it will be videoed, it will be on our website, and the guys are over here doing that at the moment. So we all have to behave ourselves, I'm told, so I'll try my level best if that's okay. So any heckling then, if we could do it outside, that'd be really wonderful. Thank you. A couple of other things I'd like to say is a couple of thank yous really. A big thank you to everybody who took part in the marketplace upstairs and what's going on up there. It was fantastic. I've been right the way around. I know my colleagues have as well. And it's a really, real accolade to the work that's going on in this particular area. It's fantastic. So on behalf of myself and the board indeed, thank you very much of everybody involved in that marketplace. It's the kind of thing I think we should do more often because it really does typify exactly what's going on and supporting our local communities. The other thing I'd like to say, if I may, as well, is a couple of other thank yous. I'd like to say particularly thank you to our corporate governance team and our the other team we have working, the intervention development team, particularly two people who've developed today and put it all together has been Asma and Alexis. So on behalf of myself, thank you very much indeed, Asma and Alexis. A lot of work goes into these things and hopefully they'll run smoothly. So thank you very much indeed for that. A couple of other things I need to just mention. As you know, we are a foundation trust. I'm not going to go into the detail. The presentation this afternoon, it will run sequentially, if you like. It'll start with me doing the introductions. It'll then be followed by Mark, our Chief Executive for SWYPFT. Will then be followed by Daryl, who will then give you an overview for the Nursing and Quality Directorate, followed by Adrian, our Director of Finance, and then finishing off quite rightly with our Lead Governor, John Laville. As many of you will know, and I hope you do know, governors are an integral and a very important part to SWYPFT. When you're a foundation trust in the NHS, we are a member organisation, and it's really important that because the governors and the governing body actually appoint the chair, they performance assure, and the non-executive directors, who in turn are then assuring the executive team. For me, the most important thing is governors, members and volunteers do these jobs for absolutely nothing. And I really believe people who do that do it therefore for the right reasons. And as a chair, it's very humbling to be involved in a membership organisation and to be appointed by the governors. And I think that's a really important thing today. And as a foundation trust, that is really, really important. So that's where we are. Without further ado, I'm just going to lead on to a small video that I just want to share with you. When I joined the trust over 18 months ago, the one thing I loved about SWYPFT was the fact it's South West Yorkshire Partnership Trust, we call it SWYPFT as the acronym, was its values and behaviours, and hopefully more importantly, how staff behave, because I really believe if you've got some great staff, they deliver great care to some of the most vulnerable people in our society, who we obviously look after. This video, I think, encapsulates all of that for me, and I use this every time when we have new starters in our trust as a way of introducing what we, as a board, and indeed people who work in our organisation, aspire to be for local communities. So just bear with me if you watch this for a minute. I think it just brings it all together beautifully. Thank you.
At South West Yorkshire Partnership NHS Foundation Trust, we work in communities alongside people who require support for their mental health, a learning disability, autism, or their ongoing physical needs.
We also run specialist hospitals for people with severe mental illness, older adults, stroke rehabilitation, and people with learning disabilities and autism.
We aim to improve every day and provide outstanding physical, mental and social care in a modern health and care system.
We believe the people best placed to make decisions about services are those that are closest to them, and that everyone should have the opportunity to have a voice, feel involved and be included. We have partnership in our title, and we believe that partnerships with people are essential in all we do.
To support the communities we serve, we know it's important to listen to everyone around us
and find more ways that we can work together to involve people in planning, co-designing and improving health and care services that place the person first and in the centre.
As a membership organisation, we invite our staff and people from the community to be our eyes and ears on the ground and to have a say and a vote in what we do.
We are always looking for new ways to increase our membership by making carers, families and the people who use our services more aware of this opportunity.
Our workforce already contains many professional workers with lived experience of mental health, learning disability, autism and caring for loved ones.
This experience makes them uniquely qualified to offer encouragement, assistance and hope to people who use our services.
Supporting our workforce are over 200 volunteers who give their time in inpatient and community settings, working with our linked charity Creative Minds, providing recovery colleges and Live Well self-management courses, as well as offering spiritual support and befriending.
In the future, we will look to include more people with lived experience in our workforce and recruit more volunteers. We want people to get the information they need to access our services and to feel that they can communicate and be heard. To make sure our workforce reflects the diversity of the population we serve, that our services are person-centred and culturally appropriate, and for everyone to know that we are here, so that together we can create, design and shape services which help people to reach their potential and live well in their communities, with all of us in mind.
Chair of the organisation, I think that encapsulates everything we are and I want to be, and it's something that every time we have new starters as I go through it, it's a great place, it's a great organisation and we're very proud of it. With that, I've got now Mark, our Chief Exec, who now will take us through what we've done in the year, finishing off with John. So on behalf of myself, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Marie. And as Marie said, my name's Mark, and it's my genuine privilege to be speaking to you today as Chief Executive of the organisation. We've got about 20 minutes, and I could actually talk for an awful long time about the achievements of our staff and what we do day in, day out in the organisation. And it's a little bit strange that we're talking about the last financial year here, which actually ended about 6 months ago, and the world's moved on an awful lot. So I'll maybe cover a little bit more about current context as well. So just to reiterate, I know you're taking up some of your own valuable time, so thank you for attending and showing the interest in the organisation. I really do appreciate it and hope you enjoy what you're going to hear for the next hour and a half. So just moving on, I think is what we talk about a lot, as Marisha said, is we are a values-based organisation. What does that mean though? What does it look like? What we really want is actually, it's not just about what we do as an organisation, it's actually how we do it. And we've got our values that you can see there, putting the person first in the centre, knowing that families and carers matter, being open, honest, transparent, etc. What we try and encourage people to do is actually talk about that in their teams. So at our trust board, for example, every time we have a trust board meeting, the very first agenda item is actually we'll have a service user story or a patient story or a staff story that actually tries to encapsulate how we've lived our values. We don't always get it right, but actually want to learn from that. So if we actually get them wrong, actually let's have a look at that and understand what we've done, what we could do better. In terms of how we use our values, most people when they join the organisation will have been through a values-based recruitment process. We have values-based appraisals. We have values-based objectives. So it's not just about what we do, it's how we do it. And these values are really important to us as an organisation. Help define who we are. Moving on, Andy, I think to the next slide, I'll just talk a little bit about the context and actually what's happening in the wider world. And it's often easy actually just to think purely about the care that we're providing, but there's so much going on in the country that actually really can impact upon how our staff are able to provide the care that they do. One thing, particularly if we look back at last year, it was a very, very challenging winter. I'm sure many of you will recall that. We've still got COVID around. It hasn't gone away. Fortunately, it's not as severe as it was. Unfortunately, we're able to meet face-to-face today like we were last year. But actually, COVID is still with us. We had a much higher prevalence of influenza again last year. So the winter was actually really tough for the entire NHS. What we've really seen, I think, in terms of demand on the organisation, on the services, is a heightened level of demand since the pandemic. So if I look at our children and younger people services, what we call CAM services, prior to the pandemic, compared to now, we've had an over 30% increase in young people seeking mental health support in our services. We talk a lot about something called acuity and complexity in our organisation. What does that mean? Actually, people are entering our services very unwell, which is adding to the demands in terms of the numbers that we're having to see, and actually the type of demand we're having to meet for our staff. And then in our Barnsley community services, people have long COVID that we didn't have previous to that. So you can see all those different demands upon our services. Huge challenge at the moment, and some of you may be aware that the NHS has just recently published a long-term workforce plan. There is a shortage of pretty much every single profession in the country at the moment, and we are no exception to that. So actually the importance for us in terms of retaining staff, ensuring that there's good well-being in place, and that we've got our own workforce plan to try and attract and retain people in our organisation and treat them really well is really key to us. What's also important, and I'll come on to this in a little bit more detail, since the last AGM, or very shortly afterwards, we had something called integrated care boards, integrated care systems that became statutory entities, which actually we are part of two. We're part of one in West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. So we're working very closely with all of our 4 places, which again I'll cover a little bit more in a moment. And actually is wider provider collaborative, so working with other partners to improve care and make it more seamless across all of the places in which we provide provide care. What we are contending with it as well, and we have been really now for about 10 months across the NHS, is actually the impact of industrial action. Fortunately, a lot of it has ended, but actually in terms of medical consultants and junior doctors, that industrial action is still taking place. And again, that adds another pressure in terms of the context we're having to contend with at the moment. Cost of living. I think every one of us has been impacted in some way by the cost of living crisis. We're seeing it with our staff, we're seeing it with our service users, members of the general public. It's more expensive for us to do an awful lot of things. So that's impacting again upon an awful lot of people, and again, in terms of how we are able to provide care. And actually, having had some really, I won't say easy years, because it's never easy in terms of finance, but more comfortable years we're used to. The finances are getting pretty tough again. So actually, and Adrian will talk about that in his presentation shortly. So you can actually see across the wider NHS, the world in which we're operating there's an awful lot of challenge. That might sound quite negative. I don't want it to be. I think what I want it to be, though, is actually the background of it. When you think of all of our 4,500 staff and the care that they're providing every day, with all of that taking place, it really is amazing. We see some fantastic examples day in, day out of how our staff are actually providing absolutely amazing care, which I really do want to go on record as thanking each and every one of them for. So if we move on, Andy, just for a second, that's quite a busy slide actually. That's our strategy house. So it actually talks about what our vision is and our mission and our values, which I've talked about in the previous slide and Marie's referred to. What I will talk about though is what we do every year. We agree a number of priorities around 4 strategic objectives that we have. So we actually have 4 objectives, one of which is to improve the health of the populations which we serve, improve the care that we provide, improve our use of resources, which might actually mean our finance, it might be how we use our IT resources, it might be how we use our buildings. And equally important, if not more, is actually to be a great place to work. Because if we're a great place to work, we've got motivated staff, then actually the others are going to follow. So what we do every year, we do this as a bottom-up exercise. We work closely with our board and our staff to develop some priorities around each of those objectives. So, and then we've actually got a number of what we call golden threads that run through each of those. One of which is about being an inclusive organisation, diverse, and promoting equality. Another one of which is actually being a socially responsible organisation at the heart of each community and being a sustainable organisation, and actually also being trauma-informed and recovery-focused. So there are 3 golden threads that run through each of our objectives. So if we can just move on to the next slide, please, Andy, and talk a little bit just about some leadership changes that we've had over the last 12 months since we last met. Fortunately, very few, and I think one of the beauties actually of any organisation is actually having some really good succession planning and developing people. So Salma Yasmin, who is our Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Strategy and Change, has realised an ambition and become a Chief Executive in her own right at Sheffield Health and Social Care. So Salma left us at the start of summer after 6 really fruitful years of service with us, and goes with our absolute best wishes and regards. So replacing Salma as our Director of Strategy and Change is a lady called Dawn Lawson. Dawn joined us 2 weeks ago. She would love to have been here today, but actually she's just starting a trek up the Himalayas up to the base camp of Everest. So best of luck to that with Dawn. We really look forward to working with Dawn over the coming years. We've also got now an associate non-executive director, which is Rachel Lee. I think Rachel's here today, so welcome Rachel. Rachel again has joined us very, very recently. We look forward to working with Rachel. And a couple of slight changes in roles. One change in role really, which is around Mandy Rayner, who actually is as well as being deputy chair, is also our senior independent director. And thank you to Mike Ford and Kate Quayle, who I don't think are with us today, but they've extended their terms with us. So we've actually got a fairly settled board now after a little period of change over previous years. So what I'll talk about now is just a little bit in terms of the work we do in each of our places. So that is actually the geography that we largely cover. We do a little bit more in some other places as well. So for example, Stop Smoking in Sheffield and Doncaster we provide, and we provide some other services in North Yorkshire. But primarily we operate in those 4 places. So Kirklees, Calderdale, Wakefield and Barnsley. Each and every one is really important to us. There is no particular priority on one being bigger or more important than the other. Partnership working is actually how we come together as an organisation, and we're actually proud to be really key partners in providing mental health, learning disability and autism services and some others in each of those places. And maybe just give you an example. If you look on the side of that on the side of that schedule, is some of the partnership arrangements we've got in place. So as an example, I can talk about in Wakefield and Kirklees, we've got mental health alliances that have developed where we actually work in close conjunction with other partner organisations, it might be independent sector, voluntary sector, charitable sector, etc., so that we're able to actually link up the care that we provide in those places as well as we can to improve it. We're also work very closely in West Yorkshire with Leeds and York Partnership and Bradford District Care Trust, and in South Yorkshire with Rotherham, Doncaster and South Humber and Sheffield Health and Social Care. And the primary aim of that is actually to look at the mental health, learning disability and autism services we provide across those geographies and actually look at what we can do together to make those services more effective and share best practice. We've got numerous examples we could provide. We actually have an alliance in Barnsley with the Barnsley Healthcare Federation, which in effect is the primary care network. So our community nurses in particular work really closely day in, day out with them, so we've got a link up there. And within each of our places, actually, we are key members of the provider collaboratives and place-based collaboratives in each of those. And what's really important to there, and I think it's a great credit to both of our integrated care systems, is actually we're giving mental health, learning disability and autism a voice. So they're represented at each of the tables in each of those places. In addition to that, as well as the places though, we are also what is known as a lead provider or coordinating provider for forensic services, so adult secure services both across West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. So we basically coordinate the services of all of those locations for low secure and medium secure services. And our fieldhead site in Wakefield is by far the largest provider of those services across the county. So if I just move on then, please, Andrew, we'll talk a little bit, and this is where I really could talk all day, actually about some of the achievements we've been through in 22-23. What I'll focus on, though, is this time last year, I actually explained what our objectives were for 22-23. And I'll just give a headline of some of the things we've done to meet those objectives this year. So I think upstairs in the marketplace, some of you may have met a gentleman, Tony Wright. I don't know if Tony's still with us. But Tony actually is absolutely a critical part of our social responsibility and sustainability plans. He's got a genuine interest and is absolutely committed to that agenda. So we've actually got approved a social responsibility and sustainability strategy for the organisation in the last year. I'm sure many of you will have seen the headlines in the news about some really tragic and very sad care that were provided in various organisations. One such organisation was Edenfield in Manchester, which was the subject of a panorama programme. We are working as part of national and regional teams looking at our inpatient care and how we can improve it in what is a very challenging environment. So that's a key objective for us where we've made some good headway. We also had a new quality strategy improved, and actually it is important we achieved all of our financial targets. And again, Adrian will explain a little bit more about that later. Operating in 4 different places, we actually occupy a lot of buildings, so are we using them to the best effect? And what's obviously changed over the last couple of years is the impact of restrictions, the impact of COVID, more hybrid working. So we've actually got a new estate strategy on how we can use our buildings to the best effect. Digital's becoming more and more important, and I think we learned a lot during the pandemic about actually how we could use digital to better effect. This is one example. We've recently launched Patient Knows Best, which basically gives improved access to the public for the health records, and again, that really will help share information and hopefully provide better care and involve people more in the care that we provide. And again, there'll be a video a little bit later on about international recruitment. We've successfully recruited international nurses and medical staff over the last 12 months, which has been a huge benefit for us, particularly when I go back to that point about the challenges we have in attracting staff across the NHS and a general supply shortage. And actually, we did better in our staff survey in terms of the number of people that responded to it and an improvement in results. So some good achievements. We didn't achieve everything. I'm not going to stand here and say what we did, but I think when you look at the context, what I've talked about and everything going in the background, we've done some really excellent work over the year. What I should also say is what we try and do when we develop all of these objectives is actually a bit of a buzzword, but is co-produce them. So whether that be with staff, service users, families and carers, to the best effect we can, we will work with people to try and develop those and make sure we are doing the right things that the people need us to do. And I should also mention that all those strategies that I've mentioned that we've been approved, we carry out something called an equality impact assessment, which basically we're looking at the impact on people with protected characteristics in particular, and making sure that any strategy that we develop and produce actually takes those measures in mind and takes those concerns in mind. What I'll do again on this next slide, Andy, is just talk about some examples of recognition that we've had over the last year or so. And again, one of the stalls upstairs, which was quite apt, was something called an individual placement support service, which is really helping people with a mental health illness back into work. And it's a relatively new service that we've introduced. But in Carecleys alone, 143 people have accessed that service. I had the real privilege of actually going to meet the team a few months ago and actually met 2 service users that have benefited from that service. And one of them actually said to me, it was life-changing for her. It changed her life. So not only have we helped her on her path to recovery, but what we helped her is help that young lady back into work. She's still in work, and it's made a real difference to her life. And I think when we talk about the wider determinants of health, employment and housing are obviously really key issues. We've achieved something called the Level 3 Disability Confidence Status. We have a number of staff networks, and we actually recognise in the organisation the importance of everybody. And achieving actually the Level 3 for Disability Confidence status, again, it's one milestone that we've achieved. We've still got a long way to go to recognise and improve, but it's an important step. I talked about it being challenging to recruit people, and I'm sure many of you work either in our organisation, the wider NHS, or other organisations will be aware that staffing can be a real challenge in attracting staff. I was actually just chatting to somebody this morning who works in our finance team, met him in the corridor. He had 10 people lined up to attend interviews on Monday and Tuesday. 5 actually turned up. So a 50% dropout rate, and that just shows how competitive it is. And we're seeing that very regularly and more, unfortunately. So we've got to be creative in how we're attracting people to the organisation. So we have been doing some virtual recruitment fairs in conjunction with some of our partners, and they've been recognised regionally and nationally. And the video that you saw talked about some of our creative approaches. So again, our Creative Minds, which is a linked charity, and I've got another slide on that in a moment, they've gained some international recognition for empowering communities to improve health. So again, some really fantastic work taking place that often goes unseen. And I think in an organisation like ours, where actually the majority of care we provide is in the community, and it's disparate over those 4 places, we don't always capture everything that we'd love to see. So what I always do is make a plea for teams. If you've got something you want to shout about, just let me know, and we will publicise it, and we want to learn from that and actually share it. So any good examples, please feel free to let me know at the end. What I'm just going to do is take a short break now. There's a small video from our called the early intervention team that I'd just like you to watch for a minute.
Gym group's something that we offer for service users as a chance to get some meaningful exercise, and it's not just good for your physical health but also your mental health. You know, it improves your mood, has them good endorphins when you do exercise, and it's good to socialise with other people. And we offer 2 sessions a week, so having it regularly can help them and get them in a good routine.
Luckily, Pure Gym have opened up to let us bring some service users along and use their facilities. Our service users were an early intervention in psychosis team. They do have a mental health barrier, The rewarding part for me is seeing people move on. We're here to help people on their recovery journey.
This has been really good for my recovery, the gym. It really helps people with their mental health and if they're stressed or anything like that. Physical activity is fantastic. When I first started at the gym, I was still in quite a bad way, but I'm a lot better down my recovery path. I feel a lot better now.
I think the most rewarding part is during the workout, the faces lift up, the mood brightens up. Seeing that smile on people's faces is the real reason why we do this job every day.
So that's a really excellent segue into the next slide. So I've just given you a couple of examples of where we've had some really strong achievements across the organisation. We were able to have our annual Excellence Awards in person for the first time in 4 years earlier this year. And I don't know how many people were there, but it was an absolutely awe-inspiring evening. And that particular video that you've seen, that team was nominated for an award, and we had something like 250 nominations. And I mean, having read just some of them and seen the videos for, I don't know how many videos we produced, maybe 20 or 25, every one of them was absolutely awe-inspiring. And it's really humbling, I think, as Marie said earlier. Marie mentioned that we have a welcome event for new starters at least once every month. And we do a little bit of an icebreaker, which is actually asking people why they do the jobs that they do. I actually know what they're going to say every time, but it's so consistent, and it absolutely sums up the NHS, I think, in terms of what binds us all together. People say they do it, actually they want to give something back. They want to help people who are vulnerable. They want to actually help people reach their potential, which is in line with our values. And our Excellence Awards was just a fantastic evening where we celebrated so many examples of that. And I really look forward to doing that again this year. And it is fantastic because I think we can all listen to the news, we can all get caught up in the many, many challenges that the NHS does have. We all read about waiting lists, etc. Actually, we do need to take the opportunity to recognise excellence and celebrate it as well. And our Excellence Awards were a great example early in the year of us being able to do that. And again, it was a huge thank you to everybody who organised that, but particularly to all the teams that had entered and actually just displayed such fantastic commitment and resilience to the organisation and the people that they are caring for. So if we can just move on, Andy, we'll just talk a little bit about creativity and health. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are wider determinants of health, and helping people recover is obviously a key fundamental part of what we do. And Creative Minds, actually, is our linked charity. It's actually celebrated 10 years of being an organisation or a charity over the past few months. What does it do? It actually works in partnership with communities, with other groups. It may introduce such things like musical therapies, theatre, arts, cultural activities, and it's some really fantastic work. You can see the number of work that we've done in Kirklees alone, which has been 16 over the past year, and we work with so many different organisations that actually help individuals reach their potential and benefit from that. We also have one of only 2 mental health museums in the country, and again, fortunately, with the end of COVID restrictions, we've been able to make better use of that. It's a really good educational facility and really interesting. So if anybody's not been to it and you want to go to Fieldhead sometime, 20 minutes and half an hour of your time. It's open most afternoons, and it really is worth just 20-30 minutes of your time. And we also have a Spirit in Mind linked charity as well, which does some great work again with local communities and faith groups. Just to recognise again that as well as providing the core elements of care, what we're trying to do is actually make ourselves recovery focused and look at the complete person as a whole, so that we can try and do everything we can to help them with their recovery. So I believe, Andy, I think the other point I would just raise, I think we talked there a little bit about 29 creative practitioners that we've introduced into our inpatient wards, so helping our service users and helping our staff, actually boosting the number of activities that they can do. So I think that's all I want to say on that particular subject. So I think if we move on now, I'm going on to another video, Andy. And this is a slightly longer video, which is our Wakefield Safety Nets video, which is really it's a service run by our staff from our CAMS. So
I enjoy attending these sessions.
Service team, along with some coaches from Wakefield Trinity Rugby Club.
I enjoy attending these sessions because it makes a lot of friends on the way, because before the sessions I didn't have as many friends, but now I have lots of people to count on. I also like attending these sessions because of the leaders. They give you lots of good tips and advice on how to make your day better if any emotions or worries are getting in your way.
Within Safety Net sessions, it's run by 2 members of staff from CAMS, so Children's Adolescents Mental Health Service, and it's also run alongside health and wellbeing coaches from Wakefield Trinity. So we have an hour of talking around the CAMS side of things, and then they will do team building exercise with the men from Trinity.
Attending these sessions have made me feel quite happy because I get to talk to people that it sort of like boosts my mood, especially after I've had a really bad day at school.
When we do the first week within the session, it's a bit of a get to know you session, so we'll explain who we are, what we do. We explain the topics we cover, so it'll be things such as anxiety, low mood, self-esteem, struggle with sleeping, like friendship groups, bullying, things like that. We'll discuss with them what they want to talk about, and then we'll tailor the sessions based on what they're wanting to discuss throughout the 8 weeks.
I enjoy attending these sessions because it's helped me become a more social person. I've made a lot of friends here. I'd tell anyone wanting to attend, just go, really. I mean, it's very, everyone is very friendly. You kind of form like a big friend group with everyone. It's definitely highlight my
and it's always going to be nervous that first session, coming somewhere new, trying something new with people that you don't know. It's always going to be nerve-wracking, but I think it's important for them to remember they're not on their own. It is a group of young people who are in similar situations, who don't feel seen, who don't feel heard. So it is, I think once you get there and you get yourself to the group and you meet those children that are like-minded and you've got those things in common, it's more of a safe space. So we do find once those young people have come and attended the group, they do continue coming.
I've got this, when we've had the sessions, I'm like, right, I've got a thing. I've got a method of, if I get angry, I can do this. If I get anxious, I can do this. And it's just one of them tools in your toolbox.
The age range for the session, so it's based on secondary school children, so this can be children in year 7 up until year 11. We have some children that have been 16 that have been in college. There has been a time where I've seen a young person come to group first week. She's been sat under a coat, not confident, not wanting to speak, not wanting to join in. After those 8-week sessions, that same young person has come back to be a peer mentor for the next cohort of people. So having the group and being in an environment where she's surrounded by people that she felt understood her, that were on her wavelength, has meant that she's been able to come out of her shell and become more confident to the part where she's felt like she can give something back.
I would tell anyone wanting to attend the sessions that it's going to be okay. They do help, and you can make a lot of friends that are like really close to you and have like the same issues, same problems, and you can just talk to them about it, and it helps you so much, honestly.
So just a couple more slides from me, then I'll hand over to Darryl. We've got another video beforehand. One thing I did want to just talk about a little bit is actually about the future as well. So we've talked about the last year, but what can we expect over the next few months as well? Well, there's a couple of these are our priority areas really for this current year. We're going to have a relentless focus on addressing inequality, working both in partnership in our places and within our own organisation. We actually, coincidentally, we had our older people's mental health services come to speak to us at our trust board yesterday, and we're recognising a lot of changes, I guess, in the presentation of people, the age of people who are coming into those services. So we've been doing an awful lot of work, both internally and with our partners and in communities, about redesigning how older people's mental health services should work. So we're actually in the middle of actually designing that now, and we'll be going up to consultation, hopefully, in the next few months. Looking at the responsiveness of our mental health services, and again, an absolute relentless focus on safety and quality. We pride ourselves on actually ensuring that we provide the safest possible services we can do. We have very, very comprehensive processes to review any incidents that we have, and we have comprehensive health and safety inspections, looking at our ligatures, etc. So that focus on health, on safety and quality is going to remain. The money, as I said, is going to get tighter. So how do we spend our money and make them get the absolutely best value for it? And it's actually in line with what the patient needs. Part of that actually might be how we use our digital. I referred to patient knows best earlier. We're actually going to be implementing digital dictation shortly, which again will give us some efficiency benefits and actually hopefully make it more accurate in terms of how we do our dictation. Ensure that our recruitment and retention and our focus on staff well-being actually again is absolutely relentless, and making sure that is inclusive as possible. And ensuring that what we do, everything that we're doing is we are living our values in what we do day in, day out. If we continue to focus on our values and how we do things, then I'm convinced that actually we won't go far wrong and we'll get more things right. So I'm just going to give a little bit more about our workforce and making the organisation a great place to work. We've done some work actually over previous years, and again, working with our teams, working with our staff, but what's important to them. So from that, we've developed 5 pledges, which are on feeling safe. We know that all of our staff want to come to work and feel safe. Sometimes there are challenging environments. We've got to ensure that we keep those environments as safe as possible for everybody. We all want to work in a positive team, don't we? I think if we all look back on our careers, what's been enjoyable, it's actually when you work part of a team that you actually like working with and are supportive to one another. We want to keep everybody fit and well, and we've got a pretty good occupational health offer and a wellbeing offer, always looking to improve and see how we can do better on that. Ensure that people can reach their potential, offering good career paths. From some of our exit interviews, we know that people actually sometimes leave for other career options. So the question we've got to ask ourselves is, are we offering the best career path for individuals and giving the right level of training and development in our own organisations? Sometimes people do actually have to move organisations, that happens. What we want to do though is make sure we've done everything we can, to attract people to our organisation, recognising they have got a good career path, but also retain people as well and making sure they've got the opportunity in our organisation. And then ensuring that everybody has a voice that counts and making sure all of that is in an inclusive manner. So just a couple of headlines on the final slide from me about some of the things that are happening with our people. So in terms of training and reporting on equality, diversity, inclusion, we are very focused on that, we're improving it. What I can say, when I look at our referrals now, our waiting lists, we've started to analyse that by, it might be gender, it might be ethnicity, it might be where people live. From that, we actually work with our commissioners and local colleagues in making sure that the services we provide are as tailor-made as possible for local communities and for what people require. Development of new roles. There are always roles developing, so we need to be at the forefront of that. And actually ensuring that we are an anti-bullying and anti-harassment organisation. I was pleased in our staff survey, we saw a reduction last year. I'm not pleased enough that I think it's gone far enough. So we again need a very clear focus on ensuring that the culture is right across the organisation and that bullying and harassment isn't tolerated. Taking on the actions from our staff survey, what we do with our staff survey, we actually empower local teams to review their own results and look at their own action plans. And one thing I'm absolutely delighted about, which I think says an awful lot about the organisations, across our organisation we've got 95 members of staff who volunteer to be a wellbeing champion in their own teams. They don't have to do that, but actually they're committed to actually working in a supportive team and looking after people's well-being. So introducing roles like that and working again in partnership, I think it all goes really well for the future, and it speaks again volumes for our organisation. So just finally from me, a final slide is a thank you. And I know if I was to try and thank everybody, I would miss some out, so I'm not going to try and do that. What I can do is I'll reiterate Marie's thanks, because these events really do not organise themselves. This has been in the planning for a long time, so a big thank you to everybody in the team that's either hosted a stall or actually come here today and organised the event, so a big thank you from me. 4,500 staff members, thank you from me, thank you from all of the board, whatever the roles are, whether you're on the front line as a nurse or a medic, whether you're actually a health support assistant, whether you work as a cleaning operative, whether you work in finance, HR, IT, all of the roles come together to deliver what we deliver. Every role is equally valued. To repeat Marie's thanks to the governors, thank you for all you do. I absolutely recognise the time that you give up, the commitment that you give to us, the feedback which is always much valued. So again, thank you for that. Thank you to all my board colleagues for actually everything that we do in terms of working as a board, the challenge we get from our non-executive directors actually to keep us as executives on our toes, for the executive directors who work beyond ridiculous hours on occasions to do what we need to do in our organisation to keep us safe and to keep us the organisation running as effectively as we can. Thank you to the service users that we look after, the families and carers, the feedback that you all give us, and thank you for enabling us to be a part of your lives. Thank you to our volunteers, our partners, and if I have missed anybody, I really apologise, but thank you anyway. So I will thank you for listening, thank you for coming today, and I'm just going to leave you with a video on international nurse recruitment, and then I think Darryl will be presenting on quality.
The international recruitment program's all about bringing in nurses from all across the world. We struggle to recruit nurses into the NHS, it's a national problem. We've started to look at alternatives in how we can address that problem. So we've successfully recruited 52 nurses across the trust. In our first year we initially planned to have 40 nurses into the trust. We achieved that plan. We're looking at now double that number. We've lost none of the nurses yet either, so we've had a 100% retention rate, which again is just testament to how successful the plan's actually been.
The environment is a very friendly one. I adjusted easily. Within the first 2 weeks, there's somebody to guide you through it. So you are not lost at all. I'm very, very, very grateful for giving me this opportunity, and I'll always encourage other people to join this trust.
In my country, I was comfortable in my role, so I wanted to go out and explore what other healthcare professionals are doing. I am happy that I chose to be a mental health nurse, and I am happy for the trust for assisting me. They've got an open door policy, they are supporting us. I am so happy because my dreams came true.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right? I'm Darryl Thompson. I'm Chief Nurse and Director of Quality and Professions, and I'm here to talk about the quality aspects of our world. Each year we publish a quality account which highlights the achievements of the organisation against the quality priorities that we set, and also whatever challenges we might have encountered as well along the way. So if we could move on, Andy, thank you. So we updated our quality priorities for 22-23 in December 2021, and you will see some themes running through, similar to when Mark talked about the strategic priorities. So we identified 3 to keep us really focused. So they're safe and responsive care, equality, inclusion and equity. I had to check then, I'm disappointed in myself, I do know them off by heart. And the health, well-being and experience of staff. So we chose those as a way of giving staff, it wasn't about imposing what the priority is for each team, it's for teams to be able to identify within those headings what would be a priority for them, driven by their local intelligence and the needs of the people they were offering a service to. As Mark mentioned earlier, we signed up our quality strategy, so that identifies how we approach quality in the organisation, and I'll talk some more about that. But the quality priorities are within that, and it also gives us space within that strategy to update those priorities each year. So we've got some examples of some of the ones that we're looking at against each of those headings. So under safe and responsive care, part of that has been all of our work that we've done around electronic prescribing and medicines administration, which has been rolled out across all of our mental health wards in the organisation. The more we focus on outcome measures, making sure that we're having the best impact for people in our care. It's how we make sure that children coming into services are waiting for the least amount of time possible. And our clinical risk assessment, how we make sure that we capture all of the risks and vulnerabilities that people present with when they come into our care, and that we plan our care in line with what those assessments tell us. With regards to equality and inclusion and equity, we focus on how we make sure we maximise the voice of people coming into our service through our friends and family test, and how many different ways we can promote that and make that accessible. We talk about our membership and making sure we get a representative membership. And we talked about enhanced monitoring of protected characteristics in clinical care. So that's making sure that within any changes that we have, Mark talked about equality impact assessments that underpin each strategy. They also underpin each policy that we have, and each service undertakes an equality impact assessment each year to make sure that everything they're providing is meeting the needs of all of the population who they serve. With regards to health and well-being and experience of staff, we've made a commitment as an organisation to become a trauma-informed organisation. Now, part of that is around how we work clinically, so that recognises that people arrive in our care due to their experience of trauma, and how can we best respond to that. And that's moving on from a model historically of what's wrong with you, but more to a model of what's happened to you and how can we help. It also recognises that we want our experience of care to be the least traumatising for people, and it also recognises that equally we will employ staff with lived experience of trauma. How can we recognise that and support colleagues, and also with some of the acuity of situations colleagues find themselves in, that they will also be exposed to trauma themselves. So how can we make sure that we care for staff in the best way possible? We've also got the supporting the system around working towards new roles. Now, Mark mentioned some of those around advanced clinical practitioners and physicians associates. So it's making sure we can maximise the workforce to make it just feel that you've got more people around you in your day-to-day work with the right skills. So that's a key piece of work both in West and South Yorkshire. Can we move on? So our approach to quality, so in our quality strategy that sets out how we want to capture this focus of our work. So we've got 5 drivers to the quality strategy. So this is about strengthening our quality management system. So how do we know we've got structures in place that give us confidence that we're approaching the work with a clear focus on quality and a clear focus on improvement? Improving the use of data. So that can be numbers, and that can be really, really important, but that can also be feedback and stories. How can we make sure that we are hearing the voice and being confident in our performance figures to guide our decision making? Building capacity and capability for improvement. We have 2 teams in the organisation who have got improvement as a clear part of their remit. We also have a significant number of colleagues who we support to do the international training course around quality improvement that we have commissioned. So it's making sure that quality improvement feels at the very core of what people bring. And the older people's story that we heard of, that Mark mentioned at board yesterday, we heard from a colleague who'd undertaken a training in quality improvement and was able to significantly reduce their response times when they got referrals. So it's helping to really support that in action. Ensuring planning is service-centred and holistic. So it's to make sure that what we're doing is relevant for the areas and driven by the views of the areas at local level. And a culture of self-development, learning and systematic delivery. So it's making sure that we are thinking quality, that each of our colleagues across the organisation is confident that they can contribute and that they can have a voice in moving forward the quality in the organisation. We have a structure called At All of Us Improve, which is a place to collate views and to share ideas and to challenge each other. And we also have quality improvement programs within each of the care groups, identified at care group level. So some of those examples were on the previous slide. How we keep an oversight of that. So each of our care groups has a governance structure to make sure that things are progressing as we hope, and that reports through to a central structure, up into committee and up into board. So it really helps to keep that connectivity of what's happening at front line and what's happening and what the awareness is at board. Thank you, Andy. So our regulators, the CQC, they came to visit us in November. That was in our older people's wards, our older people's inpatient wards across all of the organisation. So this was a focused inspection. They had, as part of our routine connection with the CQC, they will share with us if they've had any concerns about quality that have been raised with them. And so as part of a usual response, then they will occasionally undertake this type of inspection. So they came to 2 of our 6 wards for older people with mental health problems. The service wasn't rated at this inspection, so we got feedback, but it wasn't rated. And we put there, we welcome feedback from the CQC, and I guess it is really to flag that. They are our external eyes and ears, so we do value all the thoughts that they come back with after coming into our services. They're part of what helps to keep us safe. So some of the findings that they came back with, that improvements could be made to ensure all staff had the correct level of training to ensure safe care for patients. So this is about making sure all of our mandatory training is exactly where it needs to be. We talked about the risk assessments earlier, so it's making sure that where we undertake a risk assessment, those risks travel through to the care plan and are visible in the experience of the person in our care. They also suggested physical health observations were an area that we could improve. So about helping to make sure we have systematic approaches, and we've introduced something called News 2. So that's a way of being able to clearly identify physical health deterioration in somebody in our care, with a very clearly set out expected responses depending on what somebody scores with that approach. The CQC also noted that we responded positively to the points raised. So we heard it in good faith, and that we already had plans in place to make changes and improvements in the areas that they highlighted. So it wasn't that they came and all of a sudden this was news to us. We knew what the things that they'd shared. We had an improvement plan in place. We'd made plans to improve the environment, and that is ongoing still, particularly at our Dewsbury site, and with some very good feedback from colleagues as to those improvements that we're making. And staff cared for patients and showed that they had a good understanding of their needs. Now that's a simple statement, but it feels really powerful. And that patients and carers that we spoke to said they were happy with the level of care that they received and that they observed. So helpful things for us to hear back. We're now going to go on to a video where you will hear from Robert, who's from the Kirklees Physical Health and Wellbeing team, who were also there at our Excellence Awards that Mark referred to earlier.
Research has indicated since the 1950s that people living with a severe mental illness have a life expectancy of 20 years shorter. The Kirklees Physical Health and Wellness team help people to have a healthier physical health journey and hopefully give them a longer lifespan. We record basic physical observations of patients, such as the blood pressure, the height, the weight. We have to try to detect these largely preventable physical health conditions and treat them before they get serious. That includes some forms of cancer, lung disease and heart disease. One of the most rewarding aspects of the job is to develop my team and to see them turn into person-centred practitioners that really care about this agenda. We've had some success in improving physical health outcomes for people living with severe mental illness. For example, we can detect diabetes at an early stage or pre-diabetes. I think it's humbling and a privilege to work with this patient group.
Personally, I really love that. My clinical background is working with people with severe mental illness, and one phrase from a family member that stayed with me very much so is their daughter developed diabetes whilst under the care of an organisation in the Midlands because of some of the side effects from the medication that they were receiving for their mental health. And he said very bluntly, it's hard enough supporting somebody with one long-term condition, never mind two. And so the work of that team is hugely beneficial for both the people in our care and their families. So thank you, Andy. You're ahead of me there. That's impressive. So I guess one of the ways that we get feedback, and we get feedback in many different ways, but it's our friends and family test. So this is our, it's a national structure, but it's quite a straightforward way of getting a bit of a score as to would you recommend this to friends and family, but also where there's an opportunity to give some narrative, so we can get some of the stories behind that, and we capture both when we receive that. And we aim clearly with high aspiration for our community services. So this is our physical health services in Barnsley. We aim for 98%, 94%. I'd say that's still good going, but we would aspire to more. Within our mental health services, we aim for 85%. We got 85% again. Clearly, more would be better, but it's a really impressive package of feedback, given all that we hear about the pressures in the NHS currently, that people who are receiving care from us perceive it to be a quality that they would recommend. And so the overall trust-wide target for all of our services is 88 against a target of 90. And also 82% of staff said that the care of patients and service users is the trust priority. Again, we'd hope for more because we're ambitious, but it's reassuring to a certain extent that's above the national average. Andy, to my last slide. Okay, so we heard earlier from our colleagues in the first episode psychosis team and all of the benefits of that physical health group that they were talking about. And you saw Julie on there, one of my former colleagues. So one of the things that we know for people with a first episode psychosis is the quicker that we can respond and offer support, and the better the outcomes are. And 89.1% of people experiencing their first episode of psychosis, that's from age 14 upwards, were seen within 2 weeks. So that would be a really scary time for that person and their family. So it's lovely to see that level of responsiveness. Overall, 3% of people were readmitted within 28 days. Now, why that's included as a measure, I guess it's all the work that goes in on an inpatient ward to plan and prepare somebody for discharge, and then all the community support packages that are put into place to best make that discharge successful and to support that person at home. So the very lowest number that we can aim for is an indicator that all that's gone to plan. It won't be perfect, but the best we can do is indicated here. And then 99% of people awaiting admission had the crisis resolution team as a gate-kept admission. Now that's a really interesting phrase, gate-kept admission. What that means is that we're making sure that people are provided a service in the least restrictive way possible. So it's making sure that every potential aspect of community support for that person, so that hospital admission is the last resort, has been considered, explored, and only then will an inpatient admission be considered. We also met key targets around what used to be called improving access to psychological therapies. It was in this year. It's now called NHS talking therapies. That will be in the next years. So this is people with more of a mild to moderate presentation, often anxiety and depression, but that doesn't mean to say it can feel less impactful for that person. So we had 97% of people waited less than 6 weeks, and 99.9% less than 18 weeks. So clearly there's an impressive response there with regards to how quickly we can step in and support. And 52.2% of people move to recovery. Now the target is 50, so that's where at the end of their interventions, on all of the assessments that were undertaken, I talked about outcomes at the beginning. There's an outcome measure used that when somebody comes into an IAP service, it's used again when they leave, and it's what differences are between those scores that would show a definition of recovery. So there's a whistle-stop tour of quality in our organisation. I'm now going to hand over to Adrian. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Adrian Snar. I'm Director of Finance and Resources. So I'm under no illusions that talking about the accounts is not going to be the highlight of your day. But actually, everything that Mark said earlier is only possible if we keep control and grip of our financial position. So you'll see it is one of our priorities, which is to make sure that we use our resources effectively and efficiently. So there's a level of formality about what I need to present. This is our annual meeting. We do present the accounts. Don't worry, you don't get the full set, you just get the summarised version. But we need to make sure that our accounts are appropriately scrutinised, and I'll just talk a little bit about the process, and then I'll talk a little bit about what the results are, what they're telling us, what we spent our money on. And then I'll just finish off with a little bit on how we deploy some of our charitable funds and the resources that we use for our charitable funds as well. So if you just go on to the next slide, Andy, thank you. So we prepared the accounts back in April. So this is a look back. This is 22-23 accounts, and we prepared them just as the financial year ends. They go through different levels of scrutiny. So we have something called an internal audit function, and as the name suggests, they look internally to the trust. They look at our controls and processes and make sure they operate effectively. And they give us an opinion. And when they looked at our 22-23 year, they gave us a significant assurance opinion, which means they didn't see any significant control deficiencies within our organisation. So as the name suggests, internal, they do it for us. The external auditors are independent, and they focus much more on the accounts, and they focus on the preparation of those accounts. Are they technically correct? But they also start to look at the content. Do they offer value for money? We are a tax-funded organisation, so are we delivering value for money for the taxpayer? And they have a range of things that they check independently, and they give us an opinion. In good old audit language, they refer to that as good assurance and an unmodified opinion. So what that basically means in English is they didn't find anything in the accounts that they felt they needed us to change. So those draft accounts that we prepared in April were then signed off by our board in June and are now public. We send them to Parliament and they get publicised. So both levels of audit scrutiny, our own audit committee look at them, and we adopted those accounts as they were first drafted, and then we close them down and we move into 23-24 financial year. Next slide, please, Andy. Thank you. So at a very high level, those accounts show that we had a significant increase in income and we had a significant increase in expenditure. I'll go on to talk about that in a little bit more detail, but Mark mentioned earlier that we work with a number of organisations in a collaborative way, and one of the collaboratives that we have been developing over a couple of years is around adult secure services. So we deliver that service across the whole of West Yorkshire, and we now do it across the whole of South Yorkshire. And in this financial year, the South Yorkshire one went live, so you can see that there was a big increase in our income, but there was also a corresponding big increase in our expenditure. That wasn't the only reason, but that was one of the most significant ones. So what that shows year on year is that we've delivered a surplus. So in 21-22, we had a just over 10 million surplus, and in 22-23, a 5.5 million surplus. And that's before some technical applications. So you'll see in later slides that we actually talk about a lower surplus of just over 3 million. But that's kind of the high level surplus that we report. It's gone down. When we're here in a year's time, it will probably go down again. The financial position across the NHS is challenging, but nevertheless, to deliver a set of accounts with a surplus means that we have a good set of financial results. It means that we are able to prioritise and deliver on all the things that Mark described earlier. So surplus is a good position for us to be in. Next slide, please, Andy. So if you look at our board reports month on month, there's a whole range of indicators that we update the board on each time. These four here are the four key finance indicators that we do month in, month out. And what you see for the final accounts for 22-23 is broadly similar to what you see if you looked at the results for the month that we've just closed off. So as I said, we're in a strong position. We are delivering a surplus, or we did deliver a surplus in 22-23 of a net position of 3.2 million. So we give that a green indicator. That's good. It's a good place to be is with a surplus. You don't want your surpluses to be too high because you need to make sure you effectively deploy your resources and deliver the services that you require. But you certainly don't want to be in a deficit because that means you have to constrain the services that you deliver. We have a red indicator on there around agency. And that is a real challenge for us. Again, as Darryl talked about quality and Mark talked about safety, we need to make sure that we can continue to deliver high quality and safe services. But we do know that recruitment's a challenge. And when recruitment's a challenge, we have to resort to utilising our bank systems or on occasions bring in agency staff. We set ourselves a target, but we also have an externally set target for the use of agency staff. And we exceeded that in 22-23, so that's why it's a red indicator. We are trying hard to make sure that we can recruit the necessary staff into substantive roles, but that's an ongoing challenge for us. Cash is shown as amber, probably a bit harsh when we've got nearly 75 million in the bank account, but we are adrift from where we planned we would be. So there are certain restrictions on how we can use our cash reserves, but it is very important to have those cash reserves so that when we buy services into the trust, we can make sure we can promptly pay our suppliers, that we've got sufficient cash to keep trading as an organisation. So just under 75 million in the bank account is a very healthy place to be, but we are at variance from where we set the plan at the beginning of 22-23. And capital we also show as amber, and you can see there that we plan to spend about 13 million and actually spent 7. Now, perversely, the reason we underspent is because of inflationary pressures, i.e. costs going up. So when we set the plan, we had ambitions for a huge number of schemes across the trust. But if you remember that when inflation was running at 10% plus, that was impacting on the construction industry in particular. So a lot of the estimates that we put forward for capital schemes were superseded when we started to get quotes in, and the quotes were coming in at a significantly higher level than we'd planned for. Therefore, we had to curtail some of our plans. So we had to put one plan on pause because there was a near doubling of the cost. And the net result was that we actually only spent about half the capital that was available to us. Inflation remains to be a challenge for us today, but we are trying to make sure that we've got a more flexible programme so that we can adapt and flex it a little bit more and fully utilise the capital that is available to us. So on the face of it, with one green, a couple of ambers and a red, it maybe doesn't appear as strong as it actually is, but having cash in the bank, delivering a surplus, and having capital to utilise is a very strong position for an NHS trust to be in. Thanks, Andy. So I described the fact that the income had gone up, and the dominant reason is because we've gone live with the second of our 2 adult secure collaboratives. But actually, there are other sources of income that are funded to us. So the government gives inflationary uplifts to the NHS each year. Those inflationary uplifts should match our inflation, but we are in challenging times, and some inflationary pressures are moving at a rate faster than some of our income uplifts. So we did get an uplift on our contract, predominantly the biggest areas so that it can cover off pay awards. And the theory being the income goes up at the same rate as the pay awards are agreed, and they match the two. The reality is that it's actually more challenging than that the income didn't go up to match all of the pay awards, and that starts to feed through as a financial pressure for us. We still have something called the Mental Health Investment Standard. So the government committed a number of years ago that said mental health services should be invested at a higher rate than the rest of the NHS. And there's a ring-fenced pot that should flow through to mental health. It doesn't have to flow through to this trust, but our commissioners have to demonstrate it is expended on mental health services. And because of that, we see a level of growth coming into the organisation each year. The challenge for us is a lot of those mental health investments require us to increase our staffing numbers, and as I've described earlier, sometimes that's a challenge for us. So we do get that income, we do need to make sure we deploy it effectively, but there is a lead-in time, particularly when it requires us to appoint staff. So you can see, a near 25% in year is an unusually large increase, predominantly driven by the Adult Secure Collaborative, but also those inflationary pressures coming through as well. Thank you, Andy. So the flip side to that is we've got more income coming in, we've got more expenditure going out. Pay awards is significant for us. Historically, our pay to non-pay split would be high 70s, potentially 80%. So when the pay award comes through, that's our biggest step change in expenditure in any financial year. That's changed slightly because of the Adult Secure Collaboratives, where we are now buying packages of care rather than just delivering services. So there's a slight nuance there, but pay awards is still our biggest step change increase year on year. We are getting new money in. We are investing new money in new services. Again, Mark talked about the priority areas that we're working through. That mental health investment standard allows us to invest. It allows us to invest in communities where it is most needed, but it does take us some time to make sure that we can deploy those resources effectively. I won't talk too much about it because it's a very technical thing, but you can see a big change in depreciation. That is a technical accounting change. So historically, things that we lease was not considered to be an asset, it now is. So it sits on our balance sheet, and we account for something called depreciation. So that's a big number, but actually it doesn't really change anything that we do. It's an accounting entry, but we do have to reflect it in the accounts. So hopefully this slide, the pie chart in particular, is a good illustration of the fact that, you know, I said we spend the vast majority of our money on staff, and that big blue section is the staff that we directly employ, but we also utilise bank and agency staff. We'd like everything to be on the top line. We'd like to utilise agency much less. We like the flexibility that the bank offers, but we want to try and get as many substantive staff as possible, but that is a challenge for us. But you can see that it now makes up about 65% of our overall expenditures on staffing, and that's down from previous years. It was probably in the mid to high 70% last year. Next slide, please, Andy. Thank you. So non-pay expenditures, basically everything else. Spend an awful lot on our estate. We've got a very diverse estate across all our localities. Not uncommon for a community and mental health trust to have a diverse estate. So we don't have the expenditure of running one big large hospital. We do have the expenditure of running smaller buildings, including some hospitals, across a very large geographical footprint, and that brings with it challenges and cost. Clinical services and PPE, it's slightly higher than it was the year before. We are still seeing the impact of particularly on PPE, where we're having to buy some of those items as we were still in COVID measures in 22-23, but we expect that to come down slightly. The biggest single line with the biggest increase, healthcare provision, moves from 24 million to 80. So healthcare provision is where we buy health services, and again that's predominantly the Adult Secure Collaborative. So not only do we deliver forensic services through Newton Lodge, we now buy packages of care from Leeds and York Partnerships, Bradford, independent sector providers, and the expenditure sits on that line there, which is why there's such a big increase. And then the other areas, as you'd expect them to be, so establishment is the budgets required to run our organisation outside of staffing. We still maintain a good level of education and training across the trust. And what you can see in some organisations is when the financials get squeezed, these are some of the things that get squeezed as well, but we are able to support a good level of education and training across the trust. So the final slide on the core trust finances is just the capital, and just to reiterate, you know, we had over £13 million at our disposal, but we weren't able to utilise it all because of the financial pressures, and we had to pause the scheme in the Breton Centre. That scheme is still a challenge for us. We still have to figure out how we are going to be able to deliver that scheme, but that gets put back in as part of the estate strategy that Mark mentioned, and we need to figure out how we're going to finance and resource that scheme. So the final point from me is just on AUP, the charity, and again Mark mentioned some of the work that AUP does. So this sits outside core funds. This should be all the value add. This should be the things that we can't do from core NHS funding. That means that we can add value to some of the services that we offer. It has a healthy level for a charity, for a trust of this type. So we've got, you know, sort of 1.5 million of income that came in, and we expended just over £1 million. A charity is required to utilise its money. It's not there just to build up big reserves. When the money comes in, it should have a plan to deploy and spend that money, and we do that very effectively. But you do need a level of reserves to make sure that there's a safety net for that charity, and we do that very well as well. So hopefully you all have the opportunity to see some of the work that AUP do. Hopefully you can see that it complements what the trust is able to do, and it is definitely not a substitute for the things that we should be paying for out of core funds. So I shall pause there. Thank you, Andy, and I think I'm going to hand over to John now. Thank you.
More here than I thought. Right. Hello. My name's John Laville. and I am publicly elected Governor for Kirklees and also Lead Governor. I've been just started my second term as Lead Governor, so I got re-elected, so that either means I was doing a good job or it means you can have a bit more time, see if you can improve, lad. So hopefully I'll be able to tell you a little bit about our structure, our representation, what we've achieved and what we hope to achieve in the future. So the theme today, all of us and all of you. So what do we mean by all of you? Do we mean just us in this room? Do we mean the people walking sort of on Dewsbury Road, outside Bradford Road? Who do we mean? Well, Mark's already told us about the geographical area. I've popped on there the populations of each of the different council areas, 200,000 just over Calderdale and 433 in Kirklees, etc. So quite a wide area and quite diverse. So we go from the Wild West of Todmorden in the Pennines to the far east of the Five Towns in Wakefield. We go from sparsely populated areas like Ripponden to densely populated areas like we're in here in terms of Dewsbury and Batley. And if you add all that lot up, it comes to 1.2 million people. So we're here to serve 1.2 million people. Fortunately, they don't all need our services at the same time. Some people will be born in our area, will grow up in our area, and will die in our area, and they'll have never heard of SWYPFT. They'll have never used our services, and they'll be a bit oblivious to us. On the other hand, some people will use our services, and many people will actually live with us. Some for a short period of time, a few weeks, some people for many years. So we are lots of services to lots of people and lots of diverse people. We all know about, well, I guess most of us know about the mental health and learning disability services that we offer. Mark's told us about the community community medicine that we offer in Barnsley. And also we've talked about our Creative Minds charity and how we do how we promote well-being. We've talked about smoking cessation services that we do. But we also, through our linked charity, AUP and Creative Minds, we've also support other means of well-being. And we're going to look at a video in a moment, which is a group called Sangeet. It's a group of women from West Yorkshire who come together to celebrate their similarities. They sing a varied catalogue from Bollywood through to traditional songs, and they sing in Urdu and Punjabi, in Gujarati, Pashtun and Bengali. Why are we looking at this? Well, because it's part funded by Creative Minds, the charity that Adrian's just been talking about and Mark talked about earlier. It's a group out of Kirklees. It's hosted by Lawrence Batley Theatre, and we're now going to watch the short video.
आना सीओ नहीं आया दिल बांग बांग मेरा टकराया कागा बोल के दस जावे बावा क्यों दी चूड़ी नू रामा च बावा च होनो लुकावा कोई मैनू ना रोके मेरे डोल जुदाइया दी तेनू खबर किवे होवे आ जावे दिल तेरा पूरा भी ना होवे हाँ बनिया बनाया दी गल बात किवे होवे आ जावे दिल तेरा पूरा भी ना होवे
Sangeet sang at the King's coronation and sang to the world. So that's a group of Yorkshire ladies who have come together and singing for joy. Their ambassador, Madima Ansari, couldn't be here today, but she sent a message that she's so proud of their achievements. They have doubled their engagement in the past 6 months. They bring lots of joy, they bring a sense of belonging, and many of the people who are in the group talk about the improvement in their mental well-being as a result of being in Sangeet. Ambassador Ansari would like to thank the Trust for their support. So, we've got a big area, we've got lots of people, we've got lots of differences, we've got lots of different needs. So how do we represent those as a members' council? How do we represent our constituents, our population? Well, this is a slide that's been used many times before, but it stands the test of time, and it gives a pictorial of our members' council. As Marie pointed out to us right at the top of the show, we are a partnership organisation. So there's 3 different groups of governors, and one group is from our partners, and they are appointed. So we have appointed governors from our 4 council areas of Barnsley, Calderdale, Kirklees and Wakefield. We have then 3 appointed governors from our acute trusts, so that's Barnsley Hospital, Calderdale and Huddersfield and Mid Yorkshire Trust. We then have 1 appointed governor from our partner university, which is the University of Huddersfield, and 1 appointed governor from our staff side organisations. So we have 9 appointed governors in total. We then have 7 staff governors, and our staff governors represent the different disciplines within our trust, be that nursing, non-clinical support, pharmacy, or whatever. Our staff governors are elected, so they do a self-nomination, and then there is an election within their cohort, and whoever wins the election becomes a staff governor. And then finally, and not finally but not least, we have our public governors, and our public governors are again elected. The numbers in the different areas are based on the population of those areas, so we have 3 public governors in Barnsley, 3 in Calderdale, 6 in Kirklees and 5 in Wakefield. And then we have 1 governor for the rest of Yorkshire and Humber. So in total we've got 34 governors. We report into the chair, and then we have a number of non-exec directors and a number of executive directors, 3 of whom you've heard from earlier. And Marie is there squashed in the middle as chair. So that is how our members' council is made up. But how do we make sure that we are diverse? And are we diverse? Because we've talked a lot Mark's talked about equality and inclusion. How do we make sure that we are diverse? Well, with a few slides which are quite easy to understand. Here we've got the public governors against our local population. So local population of our geographical area. In terms of under 18s, you can see that we are, the maroon block is the governors, the green block is the population, so we're slightly underrepresented in the under 18 category. However, this time last year, we didn't have any governors who were under 18. And now we've got two. Daniel's here with us today, and we have another young lady, Rumesa, and both of those governors are under 18. And that is fantastic that we've now got some young people as governors. This time last year, we didn't have any governors under the age of 25. We've now got 4. And that's a fantastic improvement. So in terms of 16s to 18s to 64, again, we're slightly underrepresented, and we are slightly overrepresented in the over 65 category. And I'm not going to ask you which category I fit in, but there'll be prizes for anybody who says it's between 18 and 64. Moving on to gender, then the population is nearest to me, and you can see the population of our areas is broadly 50-50, which I know most of you would have guessed that. In terms of governors, it's 60-40, so 60% are male, 40% female. And then moving on in terms of ethnicity, a bit more detail on this slide. You can see that in terms of, again, the blue blocks are the population, the maroon blocks are our governors, and you can see that we are overrepresented from our Asian community, we're overrepresented from people of mixed background, and we're overrepresented in other ethnicities, and slightly underrepresented in white. And I am absolutely thrilled with that slide because we have got a very diverse members' council. So we can draw from all backgrounds and all experiences. So that's our members' council. Moving on to our membership. I know there's some numbers on here, so apologies. I know you've seen lots of numbers. In terms of public members, we have 8,430, and that was of March this year. Now that, as you can see, is down from 10,100, so you might say, well, why are people leaving us in droves? They're not. We went through a data cleansing exercise, and basically we took out anybody who had moved out of the area, anybody who was deceased, if there were any duplicates in there. So the data is now much more robust. So with 8,400 public members, and great to see some of you here today. We then have 4,600 staff members, and that's just up a touch. In terms of our election participation, in terms of, as I said, our staff members are elected, and so are our public governors. In terms of our staff, then 18% of our staff governors voted in the elections, which is not brilliant. But in terms of our public, there was only a measly 3.6% voted, which is rubbish, for want of a word. If we can only get sort of 3.6% of our membership to vote, it says, boy, we're not very well engaged. No point beating about the bush. Our members are not all that well engaged. So what are we going to do about that? Well, our offer at the moment is that to our members that you can vote in our elections once a year. But we can see not many people are doing that. And also you can participate in the development of our services. And yes, lots of people do, and we're very grateful for those people who do that. But it's not a great offer. If I'm out selling it, well, you can vote in our elections once a year and you can get involved in our services. It's not a great offer. So in the future, and what do we mean by the future? Do we mean like in 10 years' time? No, we don't. We mean in the next 6 months. In the next 6 months, you'll still be able to do what we've mentioned above, but we're going to have a members newsletter, members and volunteers newsletter, which will be going out every 6 months, which will tell our members about what's going on in our trust, because we've got lots of fantastic things going on and people need to know about it. We will also make sure that the members know who their governor is. So if I live in Horbury and in Kirklees, I know that my governor is, and I can contact them, and I know how to contact them if I've got any issues or any compliments or whatever. So we're going to make sure that people know who their governor is and how they can contact them. We are attending public events. So Daniel and Keith, two of our governors, were with Wakefield College last week, telling the students there about what we do, encouraging them to become members. We had a similar event at Calderdale. Marie and I and some others held a session at Huddersfield University, told people about our trust, told them about how to become members and how to become governors. And one of our governors, one of our new young governors, actually signed up to be a member at Huddersfield University, put herself forward, and she is now governor for rest of Yorkshire. So we're getting out more and attending more public meetings. And last but not least, we are developing a young people's forum. So I say we, it's not like the governors are doing all this, but the governors are supporting all this. And there's a fantastic head of steam within the trust, led by Julie and Dawn, and we are going to be very well known in terms of young people in our area. So we're going to have our own forum, and we are going to link in with the young people's forums in all our areas. So really, really excited about that. Where are we going next, Andy?
Achievements.
All right, we're going on about our achievements next. Well, I've got an apology here. We wanted to fit all this on one slide, but we've achieved that much. It's gone on to 2 slides. So please forgive us. Well, which one are we going first? Right. So we're developing a web page on our trust website. Our governors are very active in quality monitoring visits. What are they? It's when we actually go into our inpatient facilities or community services and actually see what's going on and in a way audit the services. We have regular question and answer sessions with Marie, Mark and the board committee chairs. And that gives governors access to the trust and the ability to ask what we want to ask. Now you might say, well, well, why wouldn't you do that? Well, we didn't do it a few years ago, I can tell you, but we do it now. We're updating our training programs. We are involved and we have to be by our constitution involved in the selection of non-exec directors and the chair. and as I said, we are now attending public events much more. As governors, the Trust, as always, Dawn and her team are sort of busy in the community lots of times, but now the governors are helping with that. So moving on, one thing that the governors do is helping to develop services by giving feedback. One thing that we have done, which is a specific, so if you say, right, John, give us a couple of examples. Our, and this is the Trust, letters to our service users in terms of the initial appointment letter and discharge letters weren't very good, if we're honest about it. They were sort of quite cold, matter of fact. They didn't represent our values. Well, a few of us have got together with people at Adadl's team, and I think we can be very proud to say that now those written communications are much warmer, much friendlier. They exhibit the values of the Trust, and that's what some of us governors have been doing, just helping the Trust to make our communications reflect our values. We're certainly raising the profile of the governors, and the one other thing that we have achieved in the last year, which again I'm very pleased about, is we have a full members' council. So I told you with 34 places on our members' council. Well, after the March elections, we were full, which we've not been since I've been the governor. Now that's slightly not quite right because we'd one seat unfilled, but with 33 out of 34, which, as I say, is the best that since I've been the governor. Okay, moving on. Lots of detail on here. I'm not going to take you through it particularly, but one of our constitutional responsibilities as governors is to hold the non-exec directors to account for the performance of the board. Well, what does that mean? It means that we've got to be sure that Natalie, David, Mandy, Rachel, sorry Rachel's very new, we have met, but I'm sorry about that. We've got to make sure that they are doing their job, which means that they are adding value to our executives. Well, how can you do that if you never see the non-execs in action? So 3 years ago, the only time we saw the non-execs were at our members' council meetings where they were there, and at the 8 public board meetings where we could go and listen but not ask questions, etc. And we also had the famous speed dating, which if anybody wants to know more about that, I'll tell you after, but it was a way that we were trying to get to know the non-exec directors. So that was 3 years ago. Well, now we still do those things, but we now have, as I said, 12 question and answer sessions a year, so 1 a month broadly, and that gives us access to Marie, Mark, and the chair of the board committees, so we can ask them whatever questions we want, and we get straight, truthful answers. One other thing that is very important, I believe, most of the work of the Trust, though, where the decisions are made, is in board committees. And this year, for the first time, governors have now been allowed to sit in on board committees and observe. We're not there as part of the meeting. We have to sit and listen, and that's fine. We're not getting involved in the day-to-day running of the trust. That is not our job, but we are there to just see how the non-execs and the execs interface together. So do our non-execs add value? Are they making sure that the actions are smart? Are they building on ideas? Are they challenging the executives? And having sat on one or two, then I can certainly say that they are doing that job. I sat in on the Clinical Governance Committee, which Natalie chairs, and some of the challenges made even my little hair stand on end. So certainly our non-execs are doing that, and that is something that, thanks to Marie and Mark, the governors can do. And that enables us to do our job of holding the non-execs to account. If you never see what they do, how can you do that? But we now do. So, moving on, what are we going to do? We've talked about what we've done. Right, so need to explain the colour coordination here. So if it's green, we're on with it. We're on plan. If it's amber, it means that we've started. We've not a great deal to show for it yet, but we've started. And if it's blue, it's not yet due. So, there's three themes of our objectives. These are our objectives, the Members' Council objectives for the next couple of years. Three themes. One is involvement, secondly quality, thirdly effectiveness. In terms of involvement, we want more members. I've talked about that. We want our members to know their governor. I've talked about that. We're going to have young people's forums, and we're on plan with all of that, and it's fantastic the traction that we've got there. We have got to highlight health inequalities, so governors, our role is to be the eyes and ears of the community and be that voice. At our virtual Wakefield and Barnsley governor meeting this week, Daniel fed back to us some areas of health inequality. We can now feed that back into the trust. So that's one area, and that we started on, or that we're continuing on, which started already. And finally, the trust is embarking on an accreditation called Triangle of Care. I won't go into detail, but basically the triangle is the clinician, the carer and the service user, and making sure that the communications work between them. In terms of quality, we've got to ensure transparency, and certainly that is one of the trust values, and our quality group ensure that we've got that transparency. We have got to make sure that our governors are well trained. The governors have got to play their part in patient-led assessment of the care environment, otherwise known as place visits, and quality monitoring visits, which, as I said, both of those are quite similar, and it's about the governors and non-exec directors actually getting out into our inpatient units, into our community services, and seeing what's good and sometimes what's not so good. And the governors give full support to that. And we've got some training on place visits coming up next month. The question and answer sessions are essential. We've got to keep those going. We have an objective that is not yet due to start to get some more contacts with our integrated care system colleagues. I know it says services on there, but it's integrated care systems, and we have got to have better communications with our colleagues in other similar settings. And in terms of effectiveness, holding the non-execs to account, we've got to continue to do that, observing board committees, and make sure our new governors are well trained and well inducted. And our staff governors, we have an objective that they will establish networks, staff networks within their particular discipline, so that they can speak. So Ian there, for example, can speak about his pharmacy colleagues, whether they work in Dewsbury or whether they work in Wakefield or Calderdale or wherever. So those are our objectives for next year or the next couple of years. Will we achieve them? Yes, we will, because we've got a track record of achieving. So coming on to my final slide, you'll be glad to hear. So, your Members' Council, we are proud of our achievements. We are proud of the trust and its values, because it is something special. We're proud to serve our members, and we're proud of our future plans. So, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for not heckling, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, John. As John described me as the bit in the middle, I feel like a slice of, I don't know, salami jam or something in the sandwich. We've got, you know, one side of it being the governors and members, and the other side being the trust. And as a chair, for me, pulling all that together is an absolute privilege. And I would say, wouldn't I, but I am going to say it, I think it's a massive thank you to John, particularly as lead governor, and Claire, who's now our deputy, so thank you both. I do meet them both regularly, and the candid approach is really helpful. I'm quite candid. The candid approach is helpful because it's always open, transparent, and it actually does deliver the values of the organisation that we want. So a massive thank you for me on the jam bit of the sandwich for the governors. On the other side of the sandwich, maybe the bottom side of the sandwich, the hard end of it is a massive thank you to Mark, our Chief Executive, and our exec colleagues. They do a sterling job. It was once said to me, the NHS is in a storm at the moment. It really is stormy out there. And to have an organisation like SWYPFT, our partnership trust with yourselves and our executive team, we are stable and we're actually riding the storm at the moment, and I think we're doing a really good job. And I say that wholeheartedly, and I truly believe that as a chair. So at this moment, I'll just say thank you to everybody. I couldn't say a better thank you than Mark's done. I'm not going to repeat that because that would be, I couldn't compete with that anyway, but thank you to everybody. We have got 1 or 2 minutes. I know we've overrun. Apologies for that. Are there any questions from anybody on the floor at all that you would like to raise, either with John and other members or governors, or indeed our executive team here today, or indeed myself and my non-exec colleagues? I should have mentioned my non-exec colleagues, actually, because they're part of the jam with me, and I couldn't do it without any of them either. They're a sounding board, and they're also basically really good colleagues to me to have around. I couldn't do my job without them. And, you know, we don't get paid a lot of money, but we do get paid, but not a lot. The hours they put in is phenomenal, and I couldn't thank them enough for that. So thank you to my non-exec colleagues. I should have said that. So, anything from anybody on the floor today? Anything what you've heard or you want to challenge or anything else? Yes, sir.
John, the lead governor. John, on your slide regarding lead governors, on the public council, you have one governor from the rest of Yorkshire representing Manchester, Durham, I think other age government. What is the purpose of that role? Bear in mind it's a South-West Yorkshire partnership which represents Colindale, so on and so forth.
Well, John, can you come up here? You'll need to come to my
Right, thank you. Well, if I get the wrong answer, then Julie, our Deputy Director of Corporate Governance, will put me right. But we have that one governor in the rest of Yorkshire because we do have services in the rest of Yorkshire and provide services for rest of Yorkshire, as Mark was pointing out, some of our forensic services. So that's just to make sure that we have that representation in that area. So it's not part of our, it is part of our core offering, but it is not as big a part as what we do in Calderdale, Kirklees, etc.
Thank you, John.
Is that right?
Yeah, not a bad answer. Anything else from colleagues today?
We could have, Marie, I think a few of us will wait around, won't we, at the end of the session?
Yeah,
If
sure.
anybody's got any questions individually, feel free to come
Yeah,
in.
so our exec team colleagues, non-execs, will be available for anybody to catch us. We'll just line ourselves up and then just grab us if you want a personal chat or chat afterwards, if that's okay. It's a good idea. Anyway, on behalf of myself, I'm not going to say this. I actually think, and I've been here a year and a half now, I think the membership and the Members' Council has been transformed under the leadership of John, and now yourself, Claire, coming in, and yourselves involved. The young ones are the ones we need in. That's where our future is, and we can see that growing daily. So on behalf of myself, to yourselves today, thank you for giving your time, and thank you as well. And as I say, I hope you feel reassured today. We're in a good place in a storm at the moment, and long may it continue. Thank you very much indeed.